Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to embark on a seriously fascinating journey. Today, we're attempting something massive, reverse engineering the physical universe. We'll be tracing the threads of reality all the way back to find its ultimate origin. We're stepping away from the overwhelming noise of everyday life to look at the sheer mechanics of existence, guided strictly by the logic of the source text we're analyzing today. So, here's a classic Socratic question to get us started. If literally nothing in our physical world moves, grows, or changes without some kind of energy transfer, well, how did the very first movement begin? Like, who or what gave the universe its very first push? Keep that question in the back of your mind, because every single concept we unpack today is leading us directly to that answer. Section 1. The essence of form. Let's dive right into our first concept by looking at the basic physical objects all around us. Consider this for a second. When you look out your window, what fundamentally separates a human from an animal, or say a towering mountain from a winding river? Why is a microscopic bug completely different from a giant oak tree? I mean, it seems super obvious, right? But to really break down reality, we need to define exactly what makes one thing structurally different from another. Well, the source text gives us a highly specific term for this dividing line. It's rooted in the Chinese character sheng, which we're translating here as form. Now, form is essentially the image, the size, the shape, the appearance, and the overall structural type. It acts as the ultimate boundary distinguishing one object from another. Basically, every single thing in the universe has a unique form. But where does this form actually come from? How is it determined? It turns out the fundamental origin of any form is its genetic structure, or you can think of it as its blueprint. For instance, water and oil have totally different forms because their molecular structures, their core blueprints, are completely different. But here is the critical catch. A structural blueprint without our next crucial ingredient is honestly just an illusion. A concept in your head or a line of code on a strand of DNA literally cannot physically manifest without something driving it. Moving on to Section 2, Structure Requires Energy. Let's see how we bridge that massive gap between a mere blueprint and actual physical reality. Because here's the thing, all blueprints need energy to become real. Think about some everyday examples. Building a house? A blueprint isn't enough. You absolutely need the input of human labor and mechanical energy. A tiny seed has the genetic blueprint to become a plant, sure, but it desperately needs the energy of the sun and nutrients from the soil to grow. An embryo in the womb only develops because it is constantly supplied with nutritional energy. Even a light bulb only shines when electrical energy is pushed through it. And this applies to grand geography too. A pile of earth only becomes a towering mountain through the relentless kinetic energy of the Earth's tectonic plates. A river only becomes a raging torrent by gathering the combined energy of 1,000 smaller streams. Without energy, the blueprint is just a phantom. Okay, so we've established that form requires a blueprint, and a blueprint requires energy to become reality. But that naturally begs another pretty big cascading question. We know a seed gets energy from the sun and soil. We know a river gets energy from streams. But where does all that energy actually come from? If we just keep pulling on that thread, working our way backwards, where does it lead? That brings us to Section 3, Tracing the Energy Chain. The crucial point here is that we can actually trace this grand energy chain in nature backwards, step by step. Let's literally walk backwards through the life of a simple tree sapling. For its leaves to grow, it needs water. Where does that water come from? The roots absorb it from rainwater in the soil. Step 3, where does the rain come from? Well, it falls from clouds in the sky. Step 4, how did the clouds get there? They were carried by winds blowing in from the ocean. Step 5, what causes the wind? Wind is formed by the convection of cold and hot air currents on the Earth's surface. And finally, step 6, how are those hot and cold currents generated? They form because the Earth is constantly rotating, alternately absorbing and losing the intense heat energy of the sun. So we've just traced the energy of a tiny green leaf all the way up to the rotation of the planet and the massive heat of a star. Pretty wild, right? But wait, now we hit a logical wall. We've traced the energy back to the Earth's rotation. But how did the Earth start rotating in the first place? If we ignore secondary factors like the moon's gravity just for a second, what was the initial, originating force that kicked off this massive celestial spin? Everything we've looked at so far is really just a transfer of energy from one thing to another. So what actually started the chain? Section 4, The Greatest Creator. This brings us right to the climax of our deductive journey today. This is where fundamental physics and foundational philosophy intersect in a truly fascinating way. To figure this out, we have to rely on an immovable scientific rule, the law of conservation of energy. Because of this law, there are absolutely no perpetual motion machines in the universe. Every single movement, every single change in state is pushed by prior energy. Nothing just moves itself completely independently from scratch in some infinite loop. It's scientifically impossible. So if you trace back the movement and change of absolutely everything in the universe, you eventually run out of previous steps. There simply cannot be an infinite regression. Ultimately and inevitably, there must have been an initial energy push that was completely unconstrained by other energies. It has to be the prime mover. The very first domino to fall that didn't require another domino to knock it over. In the source text, we're exploring the Chinese term shengdi, pronounced shengdi, is used to describe this ultimate source. Now, pay close attention to this because it's incredibly important how we translate and analyze this term for this explainer. The text translates it specifically as the greatest creator. But within the strict logical deduction of this text, this is not a traditional religious doctrine or a theological claim, not at all. Rather, it's presented as an impartial, logical, and physical necessity. It is the definitive scientific placeholder for that ultimate, unconstrained origin of all energy. It's literally the very first push that started the entire chain of cause and effect in the universe. So let's connect this concept right back to our Earth example from earlier. By this logic, the Earth's initial rotation, that very first spin, was pushed by the energy of the greatest creator. It was the unconstrained first input of energy, and once that initial push was given, the momentum was handed off to the ongoing celestial mechanics of our solar system. From then on, it's maintained and influenced by the gravitational interplay of the sun, the planets, and the comets. The prime mover starts the engine, and the mechanics of the universe keep it running. So, what should you really take away from this explainer? Well, I think it changes how you view the world around you. The next time you walk outside and look at the form of a leaf on a tree or watch the water flowing in a river, I want you to think about the invisible chain of energy that makes it all possible. Can you trace the blueprint of that leaf back through the rain, back through the wind, back to the rotation of the Earth, all the way to that ultimate, unconstrained first push by the greatest creator? It's a seriously profound way to look at reality, linking the smallest microbe to the grandest mechanics of the universe. Thank you so much for joining me on this logical journey today. Stay curious and keep questioning the mechanics of the world around you.